Let's make history. Don Pedro Albizu Campos was born in 1893 in Ponce, Puerto Rico. This story is another one dear to my heart on multiple levels. First, my grandmother's from Ponce, Ursula Mangual, my great-grandmother, born and raised. His mother appeared to be mentally ill. His father, who came from money, abandoned them. She, on several occasions, tried to drown herself and young Pedro Albizu Campos, but I believe like a neighbor or whatever stopped it. Then later on, she wound up drowning herself. She just walked off into a body of water and just basically drowned. She just tried to keep going. It's a very sad story. Don Pedro's aunt, he was a child when this happened, and his aunt Rosa, her sister, she was a church woman, and she was the one who raised Don Pedro. He didn't go to school till he was 12 years old, but once he got to school, he aced all of his classes. Of course, he was raised poor, but because of his excellent grades, he was able to go to the University of Vermont, and from there to Harvard Law School, the first Puerto Rican to do so. Graduated top of his class. He went and served in World War I, went back to school.
He was a valedictorian of his class at Harvard. Went through racism, wasn't able to speak. One of the professors pulled a swindle on him. He was supposed to be the lead speaker of the class of that year because he was, dark. He was a darker Indian, colored brother, and he didn't get to speak. He got into freedom fighting and rights for people through the Irish Nationalist Party. He was a fighter for the independent Irish Nationalist Party. He helped them get a lot of rights to Irish people. And from there, a lot of corrupt things were going on in PR that led him to start getting into it and studying it and calling it out.
After he graduated, he was offered all these promising positions in United States Supreme Court, all kind of things. And he turned them all down because of the racism that he witnessed and he experienced. He was a darker skinned Puerto Rican. They even have him on some forms classified as black because of the racism that he witnessed. He was dealing with real racism during that time, not the minor microaggressions that we get all bent out of shape over today. That was real racism back then. A lot of things that we would never tolerate now were more accepted in everyday life. And so he turned down all these promising positions just to fight for his country. He got a modest small home. He married one of his schoolmates. She was a doctor, I believe, or a biologist. Married her, had a few kids in the 1920s, the roaring 20s. He practiced law, but most of the people around him couldn't really even afford a lawyer, but he would help them anyway. Sometimes they would pay with food, fruit, meat. Then he began to write for a newspaper, and he wrote a column, so he started gaining popularity that way. Then he began to travel extensively throughout Latin America, basically like an unofficial speaking tour. Everywhere he went, all the Latin American countries he would speak, talk about Puerto Rican independence, anti-imperialism, and so he gained a huge following that way. Then going back to PR and touring the island, he was having rallies, and his rallies started getting more and more popular. People were already well familiar with the conditions that were going on in PR. It was just horrendous stuff, man. The Rio Piedras massacre, the Ponce massacre, where the police department just slaughtering civilians because they were affiliated with this political party. In 1930, he became the president of the Nationalist Party. He organized a strike, a sugar strike, and got everybody raises. So he just started gaining more and more attention. An officer named Riggs, who was a colonel in the police department, he called for Don Pedro to have lunch with him. And when they had lunch, he basically offered and told him he would do political favors for him if he called off this strike and just kind of worked with him more. But Don Pedro refused. After that, that same officer was killed that got pinned on Don Pedro and a few others. They got 6 years. Don Pedro got 10 years. This is in the late 1930s. He comes home 10 years later, right back to what he was doing when he went in. This guy was unbelievably strong. It didn't stop him one bit, and came right home and didn't miss a beat, all for his country. How many of us could say that we would put forth that sacrifice for our country, or our community, or even our family? Then was the October 30 uprising, where you had about 20-something people killed and many, many others wounded and injured. 1950. Then the very next day on Halloween, the Nationalist Party broke into the governor's mansion in Puerto Rico. It was the first elected governor, Luis Muñoz Marin, who was basically arch rivals with Don Pedro. And the Nationalist Party went in there and attempted to assassinate him. They went to Washington, D.C. and attempted to assassinate President Truman. They were not playing any games at all whatsoever. But it was for a cause, because a lot of people don't know, but Puerto Ricans were treated horribly initially once the United States gained control of Puerto Rico in 1898. And it's sad when you hear about the things that happened. Like, for instance, a large amount of Puerto Rican women were sterilized without their consent. Puerto Ricans were killed, others were injected with cancer, and the list goes on and on. They were just totally exploited. Basically, with slavery, you might as well say. This is how Domino Sugar, by the way, got it started exploiting the island, the people of the island. And that was Don Pedro's argument, was that Spain, before the United States acquired Puerto Rico, Spain had already granted Puerto Rico sovereignty, a pact that officially made Puerto Rico a territory of the United States. Don Pedro was saying that that's null and void because they were already granted sovereignty. But of course, now that the United States had it, they weren't about to let it go. Don Pedro was arrested again and found guilty. Altogether, this time around, he was sentenced to 81 years in 1951. However, 2 years into his sentence, he was pardoned by Luis Muñoz Marin. And what does Don Pedro do? He goes right back to fighting for independence for Puerto Rico. And 1 year later, in 1954, police were still cracking down on the Nationalist Party. They tear gassed his house, arrested him again, found him guilty. They were giving him radiation and doing all sorts of experiments on him that totally deteriorated his health. He was already becoming an elderly gentleman, and on top of that, it's just so sad. They started to call him mockingly the King of Towels. Don Pedro complained to the warden about the radiation, and they sent their own team of psychiatrists to evaluate him, and they were the ones who put this out there that he was having all sorts of delusions and hallucinations. But Don Pedro was fully aware of what was going on, and he was doing that to soothe the burns from the radiation. Truly, truly sad. He did 10 more years, and because of his health, Luis Muñoz Marin pardoned him again. But that's not the only reason. He has said in interviews that he did it so that Pedro Albizu Campos could go walk in the street and people could look at him, and it would set an example for anyone else who wanted to join the Nationalist Party. The neighborhood where my family's from, where I grew up, in East Harlem, 116th Street, which is one of the main shopping strips, it has a sub-name, a subtitle, which is Luis Muñoz Marin Boulevard, and they need to take that down because he was not about strengthening or even any support of the Puerto Rican people. He was actually an opium addict, and he was just a puppet that was placed there, a puppet of the United States. 22 April 1965, Don Pedro Albizu Campos unfortunately passed away. R.I.P. Don Pedro. You have a super intelligent guy. He has so many opportunities to do things that would gain him fame, that would gain him wealth, that would gain him status. They were giving it to him on a silver platter. He turned it down every single time to fight for the independence and the self-respect and self-determination of his community, of his family, and of his people. Yesterday was his birthday, June 29th. And oddly enough, coincidentally, or maybe not so much, another giant in Puerto Rican culture, Hector Lavoe, he died on Don Pedro's birthday. Not on that same day, but years later, obviously. They were not contemporaries. And look out for my video on that.
Well, the big exclusive story in Washington is the fact that the FBI did know that an attack was going to be undertaken by the Puerto Rican revolutionaries, but somehow or other, adequate precautions were not taken. Here is what happened. The FBI had someone planted inside these Puerto Rican nationalists, and they had heard Lolita Lebrun state that we must go to Washington and do something dramatic. They knew that this attack was going to take place. They didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but they did interview her employer and to find out all about her, and they did notify the White House and the Secretary of the Interior, who has to do with Puerto Rican relations. But this week, because of the emergency, I'll have a special interview with the governor of Puerto Rico. He's an old friend of mine and an old friend of the United States. Of course, he's an American citizen and a great and patriotic American citizen, educated right here in Washington at Georgetown University. Governor, everyone remembers the attempt on Harry Truman's life, but they don't remember the attempt on your life. Did they both occur at the same time?
The attack on my house, on the executive mansion at San Juan, took place, as a matter of fact, 2 days before the attack on President Truman at Blair House. What? They tried to enter the house with machine guns and pistols, but they failed in the attempt. There had been 2 or 3 spots over Puerto Rico where there's some violence had broken out that morning. I had no special warning that they would attempt to take the Fortaleza, that is the executive mansion itself. You can see how small the group is when they try to take one of the strongest fortresses that Spain built in the Western Hemisphere with 5 men, with 1 machine gun and 4 pistols.
Now, Governor, another question some people have asked me. This nationalist leader, Albizu Campos, I understand he was in jail and you commuted his sentence last summer.
I pardoned him because of his advancing age, because of his ill health, and because, under democratic conditions, a man like that in jail can organize his plans as easily as out of jail, but with the advantage of appearing to be a martyr. And the propaganda all over Latin America was to the effect that he was trying to liberate Puerto Rico from oppression, and that therefore he was being jailed for that reason. I thought it would clarify things if he were let out. Also, his mental state was not good. He spent all the time wrapped in cold towels, saying that some mysterious machines were throwing nuclear rays at him from a great distance, since it would be unbelievable that anybody believed that. I thought that if he were outside of the jail, people would realize how his mind was operating, and he would be able to get less young people.
Leave your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe to Will Flores TV on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and X.